please don't touch that dial as I, Dick Dinman, continue my salute to the brilliant and versatile star Vincent Price with my treasured guest, Victoria Price. WMPG, Gorham, Portland. Hi, Golden Age film fanatics, and welcome to DVD Classics Corner on the Air. My name is Dick Dinman, and our goal is to become your exclusive guide to the very best of the Golden Age classics coming out on DVD. We'll have reviews, breaking news of upcoming releases, plenty of surprise guests, and a special feature devoted to the great Golden Age film composers, which we call Cinemusic. So let's turn on the marquee and lights, camera, action. It's time for Dick's Picks, in which I get to shine the spotlight on one of my Dick's Picks of the week.
Will everyone in the theater hold on firmly to his seat, please?
Stop it! Stop it!
I'm Vincent Price. What unearthly horror did that girl gaze upon? What manner of incredible thing walked beneath that hood? It would be unfair at this time to show you any more of what went on in that laboratory where a man actually dared to play God. So fantastic, words can't begin to describe it. You must see it with your own eyes to believe it. When the fly comes your way. The fly is on its way. Watch out for it. It's far beyond anything your mind could ever conceive.
Great news for sci-fi buffs who thrilled at 20th Century Fox Home Entertainment's recent Blu-ray releases of Fantastic Voyage, as well as Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, because now our foxy friends have just unleashed into the Blu-ray marketplace the ultimate sci-fi classic of all time, and you better have your industrial strength canister of Raid ready for this one. I'm talking about the one, the only, and the original version of The Fly, the truly terrifying Vincent Price sci-fi shocker that has one of the most spine-tingling endings in horror film history. And now The Fly is even more unsettling and chilling in the crystal-clear wonder of Blu-ray. And The Fly is now available courtesy of 20th Century Fox Home Entertainment, online, or at your local video emporium, even as we speak. Stay tuned for more Dick's Picks, coming up on DVD Classics Corner on the Air very soon. Vincent Price remains to this day and beyond a true Hollywood legend whose vast and distinguished career on the Broadway stage, on radio, motion pictures, and television spanned more than half a century. In addition to being an icon of stage and screen, large and small, Vincent Price was also an avid art collector, a gourmand, a dashing and relentless charmer, and a loving father. His daughter Victoria was born shortly before Price turned 51 at the height of his popularity. Though the star's busy film schedule took him in and out of his young daughter's life, he was always a larger-than-life presence and simply her father. And what a privilege it is to have as a guest on my salute to this iconic star of the ages, the talented and gracious Victoria Price, whose acclaimed book, Vincent Price, Her Daughter's Biography, is full and candid as both Vincent Price's passionate and charismatic public persona and his conflicted inner life are treated with curiosity and understanding. Victoria Price, welcome back for our third and regrettably, at least from my corner, last chat about your magnificent dad, Vincent Price. And welcome back yet again. And we left off on our last show talking about your dad's friendship with Edward G. Robinson on Ten Commandments. And now we go back to Fox, where your dad stars or co-stars in a film called The Fly. A huge, huge success, which, by the way, 20th Century Fox has released a pristine Blu-ray of The Fly. And I would imagine that people think of The Fly and they think, well, Vincent Price plays another evil character, and it's quite the contrary. He gives a very sensitive performance in an extremely sympathetic role. Have you seen it?
Yes, I actually wrote a special about it for MSNBC.
What is your take on it? Because I think your dad really is mostly, combined with another fine actor, Herbert Marshall, and watching them work together is just marvelous.
My take on it is very much colored by my father's description of it, which was that I think he couldn't quite understand what all the science fiction fuss was all about, and they found it all hilarious. And apparently that last scene that's so famous, where the fly is saying, "Help me," they had to shoot it. My dad was a total pro. They had to shoot it over and over again because none of them could get through it without cracking up. They thought the whole thing was just hysterical. So I think that my view of it as higher art is colored a bit by his own hilarity at doing it.
I think it's a very good film, don't you? For what it is.
Oh, absolutely, and it holds up. It's still very popular.
Very popular. Then we go to your dad's William Castle phase with a film called The Tingler and a few others. How did your dad get on with William Castle, who I'll tell our audience was Mr. Gimmick? He would have skeletons fly through the theater. He would put little battery tingling things underneath seats. There's virtually nothing he wouldn't do to sell a film. How did your dad get on with William Castle?
Oh, I think he got along great. I think he appreciated that sort of person, people who were showmen and who really approached Hollywood in that way. And I think he got along great with him. I think because it seemed like it was all in good fun, which it was.
And the films are actually a lot of fun, even without the gimmicks. I actually enjoyed.
Oh yeah.
I actually enjoyed The Tingler without being goosed by an electrical shock or whatever Castle used. Now we come to an incredibly prolific period, during which I dare say Vincent Price was the only character actor of his ilk who'd worked all through the 40s and 50s who was still extremely busy, while Basil Rathbone and Lon Chaney Jr. and actors like that, and Herbert Marshall, virtually everyone had fallen by the wayside. Now comes his collaboration with Roger Corman. What was, as far as you know, the relationship between Roger Corman and Vincent Price?
I think they had a terrific relationship. It was a relationship of great mutual respect. I think they both knew that they'd hooked into something pretty exciting and terrific. My dad was very well aware of the fact that most of the other character actors of his generation weren't working, that the kind of actors that people wanted were people who were not trained the way he was, classically trained. They were people with diction like Marlon Brando or James Dean. It was a very different period. And then going into the 60s, people like Steve McQueen. And so where he landed, which was playing these sort of character period villains with this Edgar Allan Poe genre, was a gift, and he recognized that.
It gave him a tremendous visibility and identity. Now, I've seen, recently I've watched The Fall of the House of Usher, The Pit and the Pendulum, which is on the collection. One I'd never seen was The Haunted Palace, which for some reason I don't know why I avoided it all these years, and it turned out to be a beautifully directed film. But my favorite of the Cormans, I think, of the Price Cormans, is The Mask of Red Death, which I think is a truly quality film, one of the best of its genre. Would you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree with that. And it's so 60s and psychedelic as well. Mm-hmm. It's very much of its era, which I think is also terrific.
And it's photographed by the great Nicholas Roeg. The production values are appreciably higher in this film than they are in the other Corman films, and I think it's just beautifully directed and wonderfully acted by your dad. I consider it to be, I would put it in that genre in one of the 5 or 6 best of its kind. I think it's really, really that good. And I thank you for urging me to see another film on that list, which was not directed by Roger Corman, which I wouldn't have seen normally because I don't like excessive violence. A film called Witchfinder General. In America it was released as Conqueror Worm, and I knowingly refused to see it forever. And when we spoke a few weeks ago, you said, take a look at it because it's a really good Vincent Price performance, despite the fact that he didn't get on with the young director. And I have to agree with you. He is remarkable in it. What is your feeling about that film?
Absolutely. I think it was one of the most difficult things that my dad ever did because, as I have mentioned more than once, he got along with everybody. And yet this director and he did not get along. And the director was really pushing him out of what had become his comfort zone. Mm-hmm. He felt that my dad was capable of more malevolence and more depth, and he pushed my dad to get there. And he did. He got there. And so I think that it's an extraordinary film. Again, I loathe violence. I really won't watch it, and I still think that this was one of my dad's best performances.
It's a film, I think, that of all the films, surprisingly, in this collection, it's the most contemporary as far as style is concerned, and I think today's audiences probably would relate more with this film than the others.
I agree.
Is it true that the first thing that the director said was, I really wanted Donald Pleasance for the role? Is that true?
I had heard that, and I imagine that is true and did not endear him to my father.
No. Well, that said, we're going to take a quick station break, and we'll be right back with Victoria Price.
We pause now for station identification.
DVD Classics Corner on the Air is proud to be a presentation of Southern Maine's own WMPG FM, 90.9 and 104.1 on your dial. And we're back with Victoria Price as we bring up the rear on a wonderful, wonderful 3-show get-together. Another horror film that I think is just delicious, which is not on the collection, but I hope will be released sometime in the future, is a film called Theater of Blood. which is a film that plays out every actor's dream, to kill the critics that that give them negative reviews. And as far as I'm concerned, despite the fact that it's played fairly straight, except possibly for the Robert Morley section, I think it's sort of a satire in some ways. How do you feel about it?
Yes, I suppose it is a satire. Yes, I would agree with you. I don't think I'd ever really thought of it exactly in those terms, but it is. And you're absolutely right. It is every actor's dream to kill the critic.
Which he does in every way imaginable. And I'm looking forward to this film being released on Blu-ray, because also
it's a terrific film.
It's a terrific
it
film,
really
and it has
is.
the best cast, let's face it, of any of these films. I mean, it has a rich cast of some of the greatest British actors ever, including a lady named Coral Brown, who your dad kills in the film, but in real life didn't kill. They ended up being husband and wife.
Indeed, yes. He left my mom for Coral after meeting her on that film. Not a happy moment in my personal life, but certainly good for my dad.
How did you get on with Coral Brown?
Well, Coral was a difficult person.
Oh.
She was mercurial. I refer to her in my biography of my dad as a cross between Auntie Mame and Cruella de Vil. She was someone who had an incredible panache. She was one of the most stylish and talented people I'd ever met. She was incredibly talented. And she was also cruel. She was very cruel to my brother, me, my nephews, and my mother. She made our lives very difficult in many ways, and yet, despite all of that, I'm very grateful to have known her, because they broke the mold when they made Coral, and she gave me a glimpse into a world that I absolutely would not have known had I not known Coral.
And was it a happy union between your dad and Coral Brown?
I think very much so. He was very, very grateful to have been sort of brought back to life by her, and I think that's really what happened. She brought him back to life. I think, as with so many marriages, his marriage with my mother stagnated, and Coral was a very vibrant, very sexy, very alive person by all accounts, and I think she brought something to him that he never would have had without her. And he gave her an entree into a world that he had long admired, which was the British theater world, and she was a part of that. And so he opened those doors to her, and he got to spend time with people that he greatly admired and would probably not have gotten to know as well without Coral. People like Laurence Olivier and John Guinness, John Gielgud, and incredible Alan Bates, John Schlesinger, and Alan Bennett. So that was an incredible experience for him.
And something that I haven't mentioned is your dad won $32,000 on a show called the $64,000 Question. Now, curiously, the category he chose was art. How weird is that? I'm wondering how his experience on that show was, and I'm kind of curious because shortly thereafter, and obviously your dad was not implicated into the scandal, but there was a big scandal about some of the answers being fed to certain, let's say, a more attractive guests on the show. And there was a huge scandal which ultimately killed the show. And clearly there'd be no reason to give Vincent Price any answers ahead of time. But did you ever hear what his reaction was to the ultimate scandal of this show?
He felt very worried about it because it was a show on which he actually appeared not once but twice, and he won actually $32,000 twice on it. He tied once with his first competitor, who was the jockey Billy Pearson, and then the second time with Edward G. Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
And what he did say was that although he was not given answers, that they were coached in the sense that they were given sort of vague clues about things that might be asked as questions.
Mm-hmm.
And he copped to that and was very honest about that. And yet, he studied very hard for those shows, and he took them very, very seriously.
In my conversation with Sarah Karloff on my tribute to the great Boris Karloff, another close friend of Vincent Price, she mentioned that when Vincent Price and Boris and Peter Lorre and some of the others got together on some of these films, they would play, as she called it, terrible tricks on each other. I have heard of one in particular, and maybe you can verify this or not verify it, on the film called The Raven, where Peter Lorre was in a suspended in the air on wires in a raven costume, and when they called lunch, they just left him left him there. Have you heard that?
I had never heard that one, but it doesn't surprise me, and I'm sure my dad was exacting retribution for the fact that on one of his very first movies, which was called Tower of London with Basil Rathbone and Boris Karloff, they were horrible to him. They dunked him in a vat of Malmsey, which was actually a vat of very dirty water filled with old Coke bottles and cigarette stubs, and they held him under for quite a long time.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I think he was, happy to exact his revenge. But no, he was a big prank player. He certainly played those kinds of pranks on me. I remember
like what?
The very first time I lost a tooth. We were in a hotel in New York, which meant that he had actually thought this through, and I was so excited. It's the very first tooth, and I was going to get my nickel. And I lifted up my tooth, and there was this disgusting, corroded tooth thing under my pillow. It was some old denture my dad had been saving for that moment. He could hardly wait. So, yes, he was a big trick player, and he loved that.
Can you describe one other instance where he played a trick on you?
Sure. He one time we were going to visit him on the set of Theater of Blood, and we had a driver, and he took us into this part of the city that I certainly had never been to, and we got out in front of this old deserted warehouse, and all of a sudden, I was just with my mother. My father was already there on the set. And all of a sudden, all these just terrifying, scary street people came up and started pawing me and asking me for money. And I was 10 years old. And they were, covered with sores, and they had no teeth. And, I knew I was supposed to be polite about those things, but they scared the hell out of me. And it really only took me to years later that I figured out that they were the extras on the set. And my dad had sent them to do it.
And is it true, and this may be apocryphal, that when your dad was playing on, was it the Eggman or something, character?
Egghead, yes,
Egghead,
Batman.
on Batman, that after a take he began throwing eggs at everybody?
I would absolutely believe that with 100% of my being, yeah. He had a great sense of humor. And as I said, he just loved life. He loved life. so anything he could do that, brought the world to life, he was good with.
He was, I believe, 51 when you were born.
Yeah, just a month shy of his 51st birthday.
It begins to sound like, in some respects, he was younger than you.
Oh, yeah, he was a big kid.
Yes.
And he loved being a big kid.
Is there one thing about Vincent Price that we don't know? Something that might interest us? Something that is not known or recognized that you can reveal at this point?
I don't think it's something that no one knows, but it might surprise people that probably one of his great passions in life, top 3, I would have to say, was deep-sea fishing.
Oh.
And I think people would be surprised to know that he went when he was a kid. He was never happier than when he was on a fishing boat. He felt completely free. He loved the ocean in every way. And so any time he could be out on the ocean, being on a boat, fishing, putting the money in the pot, trying to win the jackpot of the biggest fish, he loved all of that.
I'm going to close with a quote from your dad where he says, and I'm quoting here, "The horror thriller offers the serious actor unique opportunities to test his ability to make the unbelievable believable." This theory is on generous display in the wonderful Shout Factory release of the Vincent Price collection, which is really a remarkable collection, not only with these wonderful, wonderful films, but also with the extra features, which are just wonderful. This, for me, and I am sure for many others, will be the release of the year. And Victoria, you have been beyond generous in appearing on 3 of our shows. I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed having you on the show. You really are one of the great guests.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk about my dad. I really feel that he is still one of the most interesting people, probably the most interesting people I ever knew, and one of the funniest and kindest and most generous. And he shaped my life immensely, and I'm so grateful to have had him as a dad. So anytime I get to talk about him is a great pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, that's my show for today. DVD Classics Corner on the Air is conceived, written, produced, and directed by me, Double D. And if you missed any part of this show, or if you'd like to hear some of my other latest shows, just go to the archives section at www.wmpg.org. And if you'd like to hear some of my older vintage shows, please go to www.dvdclassicscorner.net, where in addition to the broadcasts, you'll find hundreds of my print reviews of classic DVD releases. So, until next week on WMPG,
keep well, keep happy, and keep listening.